Western spiritual communities are more logical and also realistic. But on the other hand, Japanese spiritual communities are a little more emotional and unrealistic, like a fantasy.
So, which is more woo-woo? Would you say Eastern or West? Hey, Eiji, good to see you again. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I'm very interested in the topic of the differences between East and West within spirituality. So, you have an interesting position because you are in the East and you're, I think, surrounded by a lot of Eastern spirituality, but you also are very well versed in Western spirituality. So I think I would love to hear your your experiences with both because you are in such an interesting position where you get to experience both Eastern and Western spirituality. So I'll give you the spotlight.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know where to start, but uh, yeah, I usually watch YouTube or about spirituality, both in English and Japanese. So recently, I feel there are some differences. So first, I feel uh, like Western spiritual communities or channels or are more logical and calm and also realistic. But on the other hand, Japanese spiritual communities are a little more emotional and a little unrealistic or like a fantasy.
So which is more woo-woo? Would you say Eastern or West?
Yeah, obviously, Eastern, especially Japanese. I don't know any other Eastern countries. I just yeah watch like a Japanese um yeah spirituality.
So, when did you feel you were leaning more into Western spirituality than Eastern spirituality?
Yeah, because I've been reading English books about the law of attraction, something like Abraham or Tufti, yeah, and other books about like subconscious or meditation. Yeah, so they're very logical and realistic, and so. Because I have the concept that spirituality can be understood like science, but it's not found yet. It's how can I say more suitable for my style or like vibes, and then
Hmm.
like a Japanese spirituality, because Japanese spirituality is a little too positive for me. So they're just
Really?
to feel good, feel excited about the future, but there are no logical thinking behind that. Just like emotional or ideal, uh, you know, mindset. That's it. So there's no explanation. That's what I feel.
Hmm. I think I find that maybe the way I would have seen it, I think Western spirituality tends to be very, I guess, overly emphasizing on the positive. I'm not too familiar with the Eastern side of it. I think from
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen and read online and read on my own, I think a lot of Eastern spirituality for me tends to be very much related to detachment or related to, um, I don't know, internal work. But at the same time, when I see Western spirituality, I think it kind of just copied Eastern spirituality. But you can say it all
Mm-hmm.
come from the same place, right? Essentially, it does all come from the same place. We're talking about the same concepts and whatnot. So, do you see a lot of similarities between both East and West?
Yeah, the original concepts are pretty much the same,
Hmm.
but I think perceptions are a little different. So they said vibration is everything, and vibration is important, and then that makes your future and your present. That's the same concept. Yeah, but the difference I feel is that Western is more independent. Like it's just a personal tendency that I feel Japanese people are more dependent on something. So they are dependent on the idea of spirituality or the law of attraction. So, but on the other hand, the Western um, people are more independent. So they wanna create their lives by themselves, but they don't know how. So that's why they want to know how to create their reality or back in the right track. But Japanese people like just focusing on the praying or feel excited, but they don't care about how they can create their own lives by themselves. Which course they should go. Yeah. So Western spirituality is just a tool to make their lives better. But on the other hand, Japanese spirituality is more like a fantasy, like magic, like Aladdin.
I see what you're saying. There's a clear distinction there.
Yeah.
Now, do you think
Yeah.
um, this kind of way of perceiving spirituality uh, goes beyond spirituality in the East and in the West? So, um, being dependent on certain things, does it show up in other parts of the culture?
Uh, you mean in the Japanese culture?
Yeah, between I guess both West and East. Do you think it's because spirituality is spirituality, right? I think at the base core of it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a very clear message. But do you think it's a difference in mindset that makes West and East so different?
I think so because Uh, like Western culture is more about independence,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, Japanese culture or Japanese identity is more about the unity. So maybe Japanese people have a stronger mindset that they belong to something or community or society. So yeah, they tend to be more dependent on something or bigger, um, you know, like
Like something
groups
being
or ideas. Yeah.
more community based, you could say, right? Because I do
Yes,
see
I
that
think I think so.
in the US, comparing, I guess, because I grew up in the US, there is
Mm,
always that difference of and not just Japanese culture. I don't want to single out just Japanese culture, but amongst a lot of other countries that have a very strong sense
mm-hmm,
of community or cultural ties
mm-hmm,
that are stronger than the US.
mm-hmm,
I think you can see it when you're comparing, places like Mexico or places like Japan, places certain countries in Africa, right? There might be just a cultural difference between the two, stemming most likely from a difference in mindset and influences growing up. So, growing in the US, I always, even with spirituality, and some of the spirituality here seems very dependent on your own person, right? So, don't blame anybody else. No one else is going to fix your problems. Do you kind of have this more independent mindset?
yeah, yes. Me personally, I think
Mhm.
so. I'm leaning into more like a Western spirituality. I think because it I think it's about self-alignment.
Mhm,
Yeah, because for me, spirituality is a self-alignment. So how to align myself using spirituality, or even the idea of spirituality, not spirituality itself.
mhm.
So yeah, because for me, spirituality is just idea of there you go, life, not the magic. So, but I think the idea of spirituality in Japan is a little different. So, because I think we have the culture of like a Shinto, so it's very um, you know normal to pray for something or wish for something. Yeah. So our mindset or identity is yeah dependent. So we have dependency on on the base. So yeah.
I think it's funny how we always talk about East and West, and we never talk about North or South, but I think, East and West, that's where we see the biggest differences, right? Culture,
Yeah.
language, and those kind of things. But I think it's a very
Yeah.
interesting topic for sure. Now, we also talked about this a little bit off screen. What do you see Western content creators that are associated with spiritual content? What do you see them doing right or doing successfully that some Eastern creators or you know certain content creators that are doing spirituality content haven't done because I don't see it as popular. I think the kind of
Mm.
Western spirituality. So, and I think maybe it has to do with numbers, the algorithm, and how many people are viewing your content, depending on what country you're in. But I have rarely seen spiritual content in Japanese, for example. But you live there, you know a little bit more about the scene. So what what do you see that they're doing differently when being online?
I think Western spirituality creators are more convincing. They are more confident, and they have strong idea of their own. But Japanese creators are more gentle and less convincing. Just they sharing their ideas, not
Mhm.
convincing someone by their ideas. So yeah. And Western creators are more entertaining. So, but Japanese creators create their contents just I don't know, information or just sharing the idea. So that's it. So there, yeah, I think yeah, there is something can be improved. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now, somebody might say that they don't always want to be convinced, right? Perhaps Western
Mm-hmm.
spirituality might be like someone's trying to shove something down your throat, whether it's spiritual beliefs. I know in the past people
Mm-hmm.
have not liked religious people doing such things, trying to convince you that your way is wrong and their way is right. So I
Mm-hmm.
want, how do you go about, just in general, how do you think people can go about being gentle with their beliefs and not trying to forcefully convince somebody that what they believe is
Mm.
right? So a bit of the Japanese and maybe some Western countries like a good combination. What do you think is like the perfect mix? I know it's a,
Yeah.
a complex question. I'm trying to replay it in my mind.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes too strong, message it creates some conflicts, or it's harm
Mhm.
um the viewers, yeah, emotional mind. So because and there are so many people and there's so many type of people. So, uh, but also it's impossible to adjust everyone's niche. So I think we should focus on our niche and then just keep trying to convey our ideas or messages. And and if someone resonates with our messages, then join us. So that's
Yeah.
should be our mindset.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I think that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's a great way to end our discussion today. We've had a lot
Mhm.
of interesting views on what's going on the west side and on the east side, and I think it's a perfect example of who we are as this channel continues to grow. We're viewing um, the world through lenses on the west side versus the east side and how they relate um, through our experiences. So thank you so much, Eiji. It was a pleasure again, and I'm hoping we can have time for our next conversation soon.
Yeah, thank you.